प्रेम से बोले श्री सत्य सनातन धर्म की जय, श्री सूरज नारायण स्वामी की जय. To all our listeners and viewers on this edition of Dharma Ksetra, we welcome you as usual. And before we go further, I invite Pandit Khemraj Vyas to recite the opening prayer, and then we continue.
Let us all join in a brief moment of prayer. Hari Om Gauri Shravake Takapatra Bhangam Akrishya Hastena Dadhanmukhagre Vignam Muhurta Kalitadvitiya Danta Praroho Haratu Dvipasya Danta Praroho Haratu Dvipasya Ganapati Ganesh Bhagwan Ki Jai.
So as we have already indicated, the Dharma Ksetra program is from 6 to 7 p.m. on Sankhya every Sunday and continuing. Because of numerous and widespread requests across the country for a repeat of last week's Sunday program, which was conducted by our learned and esteemed and eminent attorney at law, the leader of the legal team for the Dharma Ksetra team, Mr. Gerald Ramdin, we have decided to rerun his discussion, his conversation with the public, especially the Hindus of Trinidad and Tobago, because during his conversation, his discussion, he made very, very many important points that we all have to think about, contemplate, but most importantly, to act upon. And we, as the Dharma Ksetra team, are always very pleased to have such an eminent, illustrious luminary in the legal field as our own attorney. This ensures that we only deal with facts on this program. This ensures that legally we are always in step with our interpretation that is correct, and so we have the best possible guidance that any team can have in any kind of discussion, in any type of commitment. Because we know, apart from being such a legal luminary, Mr. Gerald Ramdin is well known throughout this country because he is always a supporter and a defender of what is right. He is a supporter and defender of principles. He is a supporter and a defender of the poor, the downtrodden, and those who come from depressed areas. He is a stout defender of those who do not have the means to fight a legitimate battle. So he is well known. There is no question he is a champion of principle and truth and a champion of the poor person in our society. So it is truly with the greatest sense of appreciation that we have Mr. Gerald Ramdin guiding us, advising us, and ensuring that we do not make a misstep in our continuous journey towards ensuring within the shortest possible span of time the election of a new President General and a new Secretary General for the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. Those two positions have gone too long unelected. For some while we have been out forefront ensuring that nobody stays there undemocratically, and the time has come, as you will see from our ticker tape, now is the time to move forward for election of a new President General and a new Secretary General for Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. So I now As we pause, we rerun Mr. Gerald Ramdeen's presentation, his discussion, his conversation on important aspects of the SDMS conversation. And after his discussion, then Pandit Khemraj Vyas and I will continue to talk on several issues, of course highlighting those made by Mr. Gerald Ramdeen, and of course adding some new things, some new thoughts, and some new issues. So we turn to Mr. Gerald Ramdeen and his presentation at this point in time. Sitaram.
The last time I had some hesitation in coming and doing this talk with you this afternoon, because when Pandit Bares invited me to speak on behalf of the Pandits that he represents, I recall the last time that I did one of these interviews, and shortly thereafter on social media there was a skit or a clip that certain persons had put together to ridicule Pandit Bares and I and what we were standing for, and to ask the membership of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha to reject us. And I wondered to myself, the persons who were responsible for that, those persons who took the effort to go and find my picture and the picture of Pandit Bares, and they took the effort to make a clip, and took the effort to put it on social media, and took the effort of disguising your voice so that no one will recognize who you are, and took the effort of putting together a script. I wonder if it wouldn't have been better if those persons could have taken that effort and help a child in need, help a family in need, go to a temple and help the membership of that temple. But if that is what passes as the leadership in our society today, and if that is the way in which persons seek to combat what I have sought to do and what Pandit Bares have sought to do, I can only tell you today that we will pray for you and hope that better sense will prevail the next time that you decide to do something like that. It's a very, very sad state of affairs. But what I can promise you is this: nothing that you do, nothing that those people who did that will deter us, myself and Pandit Bares and all of the other Pandits who wish to uphold this document, the Constitution of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. This is what we are fighting for. Nobody is fighting to take over the Mahasabha. What we are fighting for is for people to abide by the rules of the organization so that the membership of the Mahasabha will benefit at the end of the day. The persons who go to the temples every day, they will benefit. The students that go to the schools every day, they will benefit. And at the end of the day, when they benefit, when the schools benefit, when the temples benefit, we will have a better Trinidad and Tobago. That is what this is about. Pandit Bares has been one of the pillars, together with the late Secretary General, in building the Mahasabha into what it is today. They fought together the battles that allowed the Mahasabha today to have a radio station and a TV station, primary schools, secondary schools, and to be able to provide one of the premier learning institutions in our country. That is what they fought for. And what we are fighting for is to preserve that legacy, to preserve that institution, and to preserve the principles upon which that institution was built. And you know, it was said that I want to take over the Mahasabha and I must be rejected. I want to make it very clear. I have a job to do here. My job is to uphold the constitution of the Mahasabha, not to take over any Mahasabha. I am not here for any position. I am here to uphold the principles upon which an organization was founded over 50 years ago. I am here to uphold the principles upon which the Constitution was put together. And it is very clear that what is happening now is entirely contrary to the express provisions of the Constitution. And I will demonstrate that so that the members, you know, one of the things that I was surprised with is that when you go to the temples throughout this country and you ask the simple members of the temples and the membership of the Mahasabha, what does the Constitution say? Most of them don't even know that the Mahasabha has a constitution. The Mahasabha, the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha, fought one of the greatest battles and were victorious in it, in fighting for a radio license in this country. And they got a TV station. And they have the full armory to arm the membership of the Mahasabha with the most important gift that you can give to them, knowledge. The most important thing that you can teach them, what does the constitution of the Mahasabha say? Apart from going to your temples and practicing your religion, not a single member has taken the time to be able to go into the temples and speak to the membership and let them know what does the constitution say. You know why it is like that? Because it is beneficial for those who hold office to not undertake that task. So let me do what they will not do. Let me read to you and take you to the provisions of the Constitution. And the Constitution of the Mahasabha says, under the heading Election of Officers of Parent Body Composition, members of the Executive, including the President General and Secretary General, shall hold office for a term of 5 consecutive years after the election. The last election was in 2018. If, for any reason, the office of President General becomes vacant, the first Vice President shall carry out the duties of the President General until the next September conference, with a new President when a new President General shall be elected for the rest of the term. Unfortunately, the elected President General, Pandit Uttam, had passed, and that post was then, by virtue of the Constitution, transferred or was held by Pandit Krishna Rambali. That election for the office of President General should have been held in September of 2019. As we all know, the post of Secretary General also became vacant when the late Secretary General passed away. And upon passing away, the post of Secretary General was then assumed by Mr. Vijay Maharaj. Elections were supposed to be held in September of 2020. Up to today, no elections have been held. This is the constitution of the Mahasabha. This is not Mr. Ramdeen saying that or Pandit Bade saying that. These are the provisions by which the membership of the Mahasabha decided many years ago that they would be governed by. Why is it today that there is this attempt to not abide by the provisions of the Constitution? And after Pandit Bades and the majority of Pandits who belong to the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha indicated their intention to take steps to force those who didn't want to abide by the terms of the Constitution, a letter was written in February of this year. On the 16th of February, 2021, under the heading Operation Guidelines, addressed to the Executive and Management Committees of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha Mandirs. And I would really, it is a sad thing to do, but I would like to read to you what came from the hand of someone who says they are the acting Secretary General. I have pursued this document, which is the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha of Trinidad and Tobago Incorporated Constitution, revised 1979, incorporated by Act number 41 of 1952. I've read it from the first page to the last page, and I haven't seen any position in this document that governs the running of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha that confers power on someone called the Acting Secretary General. I don't know where that position comes from, but let me read to you what the Acting Secretary General of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha wrote to the executive management committees of the Mahasabha Mandirs. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the guidelines issued by the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago beginning in March of 2020 to present, all organizations, institutions, establishments, etc. have been restricted and confined in their normal day-to-day operations. In adherence to these guidelines, the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha has issued guidelines and reiterates the following. The present elected management committee of all mandirs continue to function under the existing COVID-19 guidelines until the existing COVID-19 guidelines are lifted or altered, and provisions are made to facilitate conducting elections that are due. The SDMS executive will issue instructions when this activity can begin. Please note, elections are conducted by persons instructed to do so on behalf of the SDMS executive. 2. The SDMS executive has an established means of communication through the Secretariat and the SDMS headquarters located at Eastern Main Road, St. Augustine, and/or through the regional coordinators in all regions. 3. The SDMS executive has not authorized any singular groups or group, in particular Pandit Bade Sitahal Maharaj, and/or any persons acting together with him and/or on his behalf, to visit our mandirs, to request or access private and confidential information of your branch, and/or direct a particular course of action. 4. The use of all SDMS premises and facilities by external persons or groups must be authorized by the SDMS. 5. Pundits officiating at SDMS mandirs must be registered members of the SDMS Pundits Parishad. SDMS Pundits possess a SDMS Pundits ID card. 6. Persons speaking or delivering addresses, messages at our mandirs must have approval and authorization by the SDMS executive. Please do not be intimidated by persons claiming to represent the SDMS executive. Any form of intimidation, threats, bullying, or interference by such persons should be reported to the SDMS executive immediately. Yours in Dharma, Vijay Maharaj, Secretary General, Acting. Mr. Maharaj, I act on behalf of Pandit Bade Sitahal Maharaj and the majority of Pandits that belong to the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. And I wouldn't put my response in writing to you. I will tell you what my response is. Firstly, we've had a general election in this country and a local government election and THA elections during the time that we have been governed by the public health guidelines. So that your statement that elections in relation to the SDMS and pundits throughout temples throughout the country is empty and vacuous. It provides no lawful basis, or there is no lawful basis for postponing the elections of the executives in the temples of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. Elections should have been held in March. We are now in July. Those elections are the first step in the other elections that have to be held for the Mahasabha, for the posts that have been vacant and have not been lawfully held since September of 2019 and September of 2020. So that this excuse that has been given for not holding the elections is not worth the paper that is written on. That's in relation to not holding the elections. The means of communication, if you have a means of communication with the SDMS, we have no trouble with that. Temples are free to communicate with you, and they are free to communicate with us as well. But what I find very abhorrent is this attack, this unwarranted attack on Pandit Bade Sitahal Maharaj and those who are acting together with him. I assume that includes me, because I represent him. Well, I would like to announce to you, if it hasn't been announced before, that the temples and the mandirs throughout this country, where members of the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha go to pray and worship, are not the playthings of the executive of the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha. They are holy places where people will continue to perform their religious functions. And they are places where they are free to meet with whoever they wish. They are not the private chattels of members of the executive of the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha. And I will echo your words. We who represent hundreds of thousands of members throughout this country will not be intimidated or bullied or, let me use your words, threatened or interfered with by any member or anyone. We will continue to do the work throughout the temples, and nothing said or nothing written is going to change that. These statements about the use by external persons, I want to let you know, Mr. Maharaj, on behalf of the Pandits, that we will continue to meet with the membership, because it is they who want to meet with us. It is they who want to enforce the provisions of the Constitution. It is they who want elections. It is the membership that is crying out for elections. They want to elect the management committees of their temples so that their temples can perform. They want to elect persons to hold office of Secretary General and President General because it is their right. It is their right, the right of the temples to do that under the Constitution. And you know what has caused them to get into this position, Mr. Maharaj? Let me tell you what it is. It is the fact that since the pandemic, they have been suffering. The Hindu community in particular has been suffering. Why? Because, like other members of the country, because they can't go to their temples and their mandirs, just like how Christians can't go to their churches and Muslims can't go to their mosques. But you know what is different? What is different is that the Hindu community is not able to perform the most essential rituals to practice their religion. So while the rivers are closed, nobody on behalf of the Hindu community found it appropriate and proper to speak with the authorities and have an exception so that the Hindu community could go and do their shaving 10 days after the death of any one of their loved ones. You and the membership of the executive had a number of programs that TV Jagrati ran about all that you have done since you have assumed office. Well, can you tell us why the simple act of liaising with the police service and the government and the public health officials couldn't result in an exception being made to the Hindu community so that they could have been able to go and do this simple task to send away their loved ones in a manner that is scripted by the scriptures? They are hurting because at this time, the temples and the membership are suffering because they are not able to hold their religious functions and they are not able to look after their membership. And I invite you, just as how you wrote this letter, to tell us what you've done for the membership in all of these temples that you assume to have this extraordinary power to give these directions to. What have you done for them? What have you done for the membership? Have you gone and found out what is happening to them? That is what we want to know. We want to put a group of people to hold the positions of the SDMS so that what is taking place today would have never taken place while the late Secretary General was around. The Hindu community would never have been disenfranchised as they are today. The membership of the SDMS would have never felt as lost as they feel today. And so, as I did the last time that I was here, I want to signal to the executive and to the acting Secretary General of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha that let us do the right thing. This is an invitation for you to comply with the provisions of the Constitution and hold elections as the Constitution prescribes. It is long overdue. The membership deserve the right to elect the members who run this organization. The educational side of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha is funded 90% by the taxpayers of this country. It is public funds that runs the schools, and the decisions that are made in relation to the educational side of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha must be decisions that are made lawfully by persons who hold office lawfully. And if this state of affairs that has persisted since September of 2019 continues, my instructions are to rectify that by going to court. And I would have thought that those who wish to hold power would be those that are most willing to subject themselves to the provisions of the Constitution. That is the governing document that prescribes how you hold office, for how long you hold office, and the means by which you hold office. It is time, Mr. Maharaj, for us to do the right thing. It is time for us to put egos aside. It is time for us to put the membership first. The one thing that the people of the Hindu community and the membership of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha were proud of more than anything else under the late Secretary General was that he put his people first. He put his religion first. He put Trinidad and Tobago first. And what is transpiring now in this organization is a far cry from what transpired under his leadership. The Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha is an important institution. It is one of the most important institutions in our country. It is one of the pillars of the education system and is one of the pillars of the religious organizations in this country. The Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha represents hundreds of thousands of persons. It represents the instrument by which students are able to achieve their dreams. During the last educational year, 300 students were not able to achieve their dreams. The majority of those 300 students would have been persons who belong to schools that fall under the umbrella of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. I personally was involved in that fight for students who should have been given a scholarship and were not. For students who were deprived of their dream. And what did the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha do for them? What have they done to ensure that those students who ought to have been entitled to a scholarship, who ought to have been entitled to pursue their education at a higher institution of learning of their choice, funded by the government, who don't have that opportunity anymore, who were not as lucky as Priya? What have you done to help them? I want to lead the group of people who will make a difference. I want to be the one standing side by side with those persons who are prepared to put citizens, devotees, students first before themselves. I want to stand side by side with those persons who are prepared to put the temples and the schools before themselves, who are prepared to use the resources of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha to better the lives of the membership, who are prepared to advance the goals and aspirations of the membership, and who are prepared to do public service for the people of this country and their brothers and sisters. So whereas the message that was sent out on the last occasion that I spoke here was to reject them, Mr. Ramdeen and Pandit Badis, it is my invitation today to the membership of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha to accept a group of people who will fight for you, who will fight for your religion, who will fight for your children, who will fight to ensure that our students and our devotees can look down the road and have a bright future ahead of them, who will sit in positions and ensure that the laws are obeyed and the Constitution is complied by. And if that is done, the one thing that I can guarantee you is that the lives of the citizens of this country will be better. Trinidad and Tobago will be a better place, and the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha and each temple and mandir throughout this country will be stronger, and that can only lead to a stronger Trinidad and Tobago. So I ask you to support Pandit Badis and support those Pandits who are prepared to work with you, to work together, to unite the hundreds and thousands of members of the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha, so that the institution that our forefathers built, from cowshed schools to prestigious colleges today, will have a bright future ahead. And the institution that fought from cowsheds to colleges to a radio station and to a TV station will be preserved, not for me and not for Pandit Badis, but for those who come after us, so that they can use that institution to achieve their goals and their aspirations, which was the whole basis upon which the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha was formed. And so today, as I end my conversation with you, I ask you to do the right thing. Call for elections, work together, unify the Hindu community, and let us use the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha to have a better Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Sitaram once more. And of course, we know you would have been most enlightened by the thoughts shared by Mr. Gerald Ramdeen, coming from a legal framework, coming from a framework that can stand scrutiny. As you know and you saw in the presentation, he made use and he showed that his discussion was centered on the constitution of Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. And so, as you know, we have been saying for several months now that nobody can call himself President General of Mahasabha. No one can call himself Secretary General of Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. Those two posts have no people in them at present who are there legally, who are there constitutionally. And of course, now is the time for remedy. As you would have heard Mr. Gerald Ramdeen point out, now will be the time for remedy. And of course, as Hindus, we have to ask ourselves a very, very important and pertinent and relevant question. If a religious organization lacks morality, if a religious organization lacks ethics, If a religious organization breaches principles, if a religious organization does not follow its own constitution, then what do we leave for the wider society? Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha is a key religious organization in this country, and yet we have no leaders, and people continuing to foist themselves and describing Mr. Krishna Rambali, whether he describes himself or allows others to call him President General. The same thing with Mr. Vijay Maharaj, allowing people to call himself Acting Secretary General. What kind of morality and ethics and principles do we expect from anyone? We cannot allow the SDMS to descend into the gutter where it completely loses all respect. Because if a religious organization cannot deal with morality and ethics and principles and facts and its own constitution, it is really highly unlikely that we can have the moral conscience or to say anything in society, or can we expect moral respect from anyone? We have surrendered. SDMS has surrendered those things. There's no question about it, because the whole country knows now, and there are very grave and serious risks and implications of what is happening. And I'll come back to one very serious and grave risk that Mr. Ramdeen pointed out. Because if we allow ourselves to function in such a way, there is no elected leadership, even though post an election time has gone a significant time. We have no voice in this country. Think about it. Let us ask ourselves as Hindus, who takes on the SDMS in this country at present? Nobody, not the media, not the government, not any other civil society group, because it is well known now that we have people who are unconstitutionally describing themselves by certain names. Suffice it to say, such a thing cannot happen. You heard again, as was read by Mr. Ramdeen in the Constitution, election for President General was due in September of 2019. Think about that. We are mid-year in 2021, and so almost 2 years will come very shortly where we have no elected President General, and therefore no President General. Let me emphasize that we have no President General, and we have no Secretary General. Mr. Vijay Maharaj is an Assistant Secretary of the Mahasabha, placed there by the late Secretary General. That's all. Assistant Secretary. And the remedy will come. No question, the remedy will come shortly to deal with that. But let us understand very clearly, he is not Acting Secretary General, he is not Assistant Secretary General. Absolutely none of that. It is outside of Mahasabha's own constitution. It is outside of morality. It is outside of ethics. It is outside of principle. And so, time for elections. Time for elections. All of us as Hindus, as executive members, we have to stand firm on conformity with the constitution. As principals, we have to ensure that we are not party to breach of SDMS constitution. As Mandir leaders and as pundits, we will never be part of that. Why is this struggle? Why? Well, not a struggle, because we are not struggling, because we understand what is the destination, we understand the journey, we understand all that is required. We are not struggling for anything. We are on a clinical, consistent pathway to achieve a result. We have tremendous widespread support, so it's not that we are guessing and we don't know our support and we are engaging in conjecture. We fully well know where we are, where we will reach, so it is just a short distance again, and of course, ably and superbly led by Mr. Gerald Ramdeen, will reach there in the shortest possible of time in the near future. So let us ensure accountability, transparency, and democracy in Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha. Let us not allow anyone to call himself President General when we have none. Let us not allow ourselves to call anybody to call himself Secretary General in both instances, acting, assistant, whatever. None has any meaning. You know, Mr. Gerald Ramdeen made a very important point. Calling somebody or writing assistant, acting President General or acting Secretary General, he said, and you would have heard it just a few minutes before, that is not even worth the paper it is written on, which is to tell you there is nothing like acting President General and acting Secretary General. That has no value. It is not even worth the paper it is written on. And we'll come back to that. But of course, as usual, Pandit Khemaraj Vyas always has some very important points and some thoughts to share. So he will continue the discussion before it reverts to me.
Sitaram, my dear devotees, certainly a pleasure to be with you again on our Dharma Ksetra program, where we continue to share with you some of our thoughts and, of course, certain incidents that take place in the Hindu community, of which, of course, we are not very happy and not very pleased. Before I go into that, my dear devotees, just to pick up where Pandit Bhadesh just left out. You know, I have been wondering how many of our people, our Hindu brothers and sisters, how many of our temple executives, president, secretary, otherwise, has ever taken up the phone and called Mr. Vijay Maharaj to inquire about elections. Mr. Maharaj, when will elections be called? Mr. Maharaj, we have been hearing on Dharma Ksetra lots of accusations that you are not acting Secretary General, Mr. Rambali is not acting President. Can you tell us what is the status? Are they right or are they wrong? If they are wrong, is it possible for you to hold a program and rectify the misinterpretation? If what they are saying about the Constitution is wrong, why don't you hold again a press briefing, a program on radio, TV, Sankhya, explaining with your advisors that these things are wrong, that the Dharma Ksetra team, they are misinterpreting the Constitution. Why do you allow the Mahasabha to continue along this path where people are so much disenfranchised, as we may say? And if your answer is, well, afraid to call Mr. Vijay, that is the point we are making. Is that the kind of leader you want, whom you cannot approach, of whom you are afraid, because he threatens, because he bullies? No, my dear friends, that is not what we want. And I just want to draw a quick reference. Towards the end of our last session, we drew an incident to your attention of a young Pandit in the Devi area being threatened by Mr. Vijay Maharaj. Because of his problems with the temple and so forth, he decided that he's going to withdraw his services. Ups, Mr. Maharaj, Vijay Maharaj, I want a resignation from you. And that resignation will also apply to your two sons. What kind of madness? What kind of madness is this? And subsequently, threatening that young Pandit, if you talk to anybody about this, then I'm going to take your name to radio and TV, Jagriti, where you will be scandalized. Talk about threatening. Talk about threatening, my dear devotees. Is this what we want? A Pandit is not free to make a decision to continue or not to continue to serve. And mind you, my dear devotees, I mean, everybody knows that serving a temple is almost voluntary. Well, it is all definitely voluntary, and in very few instances there is any financial reward. And even if there is financial reward, it is only in name. So, my dear friend, that indicates to you that Pandits are under threat. Are you going to allow yourself to be threatened, to be bullied? That someone can take up a phone call and call you and intimidate you? No, my dear friends, that is not what we stand for. I want to point out another beautiful incident, beautiful I might say, in our favor. There is a Pandit who belongs to the old boys of a certain college. You know, most schools, they have the alma mater, and, you know, students who have left, they join the old boys group and so forth. So this Pandit belongs to one of these groups, and they had a conference sort of, hook up by way of the telephone and so forth. Mr. Vijay Maharaj learned of this, and of course promptly went on the phone to call Data Pandit to find out, so what organization you belong to today. And of course, my dear friends, you could very well imagine, as I do, that as is typical of them, who give you permission to join that organization? What is the purpose of belonging to that organization? No, you see, my dear friends, the Pandit stood up and said, so you want to tell me what organization I can belong to? Whether I should be a member of the old boys organization or not? How does that affect you anyway? The point here, my dear devotees, is that they will go to all lengths to prevent you from associating even with your own friends, your teachers, your colleagues, if they think that that is inimical of their position. If they feel that their positions are going to be threatened, then certainly. What kind of a leadership do we have, my dear friends? The Constitution of this land guarantees you freedom of speech, freedom of association. And here we have. As a matter of fact, the Constitution of Mahasabha does not deny you from belonging to any organization. And of course, we will deal more about that in subsequent program. But the point we are making here, my dear friends, even your personal rights assured by the Constitution, this is now being transgressed by Mr. Vijay Maharaj. You cannot associate with anybody. And we know for a fact, my dear friends, many of the younger Pandits, they have been intimidated. They have been told, do not speak with Pandit K. Maharaj. Do not speak with Pandit Bhares. Do not speak, associate with these people. Why? Because they will learn the truth, and of course, then their loyalty might sway. I remember of an incident where one young man from way down south had a discussion with Pandit Bhares, and he was summoned to come to the office of Vijay Maharaj, just so that he could be intimidated. My dear devotees, so much more to be told, but the point we are making here, especially our presidents, our executive members of the temples, the branches, the power is in your hands. You are the ones who will determine where Hinduism is when the beginning of 2022, at the beginning of 2022. Think carefully, be prepared for that which is coming. And as our lawyer said, Mr. Rajal Ramdin said, he is there to ensure that what has to take place will take place, and that is elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pandit K. Maharaj Vyas. And listeners and viewers, we are speaking about accountability, responsibility, and of course, the right to legally hold office which belongs to elected members. What we are dealing with is to ensure that we preserve the Mahasabha and ensure we preserve the principles on which the Mahasabha was founded in 1952. And this is why, from the very beginning, let's make it very clear, there were many, many Pandits from the very beginning who departed any support for Vijay Maharaj, because we all knew it is not constitutional. There is no, again, as Mr. Ramdin pointed out, he looked at the Constitution first page to last page. There is no provision expressed in the Constitution for any person to be called acting Secretary General. But Pandit K. Maharaj Vyas made very important points which we continue to make, and we continue to find new examples and new evidence to make you think. And he said, why is there people not clamoring for the right thing to be done? We are doing it on behalf of all those who have some kind of insecurity at this present point in time. But devotees and listeners and viewers, think about this most horrible example. We had on TV Jagriti the most renowned national insurance program. And not only the most renowned national insurance program, we had the most renowned national insurance expert in Shri Ramnath Ramcharita, who conducted programs on TV Jagriti for years, and to the benefit not only of tens of thousands of Hindus, but citizens of all races, citizens of all religions. And not only in Trinidad, he got what was due for many citizens who migrated, whether they were in England, the States, or Canada. Because of his expert skill and knowledge and experience, he was able to get what was due for our citizens across the land, regardless of race, religion, any kind of affiliations. And Mr. Vijay Maharaj stopped his program because our Thursday program was sponsored by Mr. Ramnath Ramcharita. Because some way he is perceived as being in support of us. And so what is wrong with that? Even if he supports us, I'm not saying he supports us, but even if he supports us, is that a reason to deny and deprive so many tens and thousands of people of a program that will give them their due? That we don't need you here again? Look at the loss, and caused by whom? Somebody who is calling himself acting secretary, assistant, whatever. Sometimes I don't even care about those titles because none is worth any value. But who are such individuals to stop a program like that? What is Radio Jagriti reduced to? There is no real programming to advance Hinduism and Sanatan Dharma in Trinidad. We have old Bal Vikas reruns. As a principal told me, somebody called him and said, look, you're on TV. And then when he looked, his daughter, he saw himself and his daughter is now an adult. We see all kinds of things, but not that will advance Sanatan Dharma and Hinduism. So, again, we will continue, as Mr. Ramdin said. Now it's time for ensuring in the shortest span of time, election will be held. He will do all that is required, and I'm certain he will do it during the course of this week. So we will deal with that next week and many more issues. We are just pointing out, when you have people who are not there legally or constitutionally destroying Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha, do you think Pandit Bhadis and Pandit Kemraj and Pandit Ravindranath and Pandit Hardev and many other Pandits will sit quietly? From the very beginning, we did not endorse anybody because it is well known, and we would have said it many months ago, my separation from a very close relationship with the late Secretary General came when I told him I will not endorse anybody after him. Let the Hindu community decide. And when that time comes, not too long from now, let the Hindu community decide. But in the meantime, understand the tremendous risk we are at. Because, again, just to close with a point Mr. Ramdin made, 90% of the education funds come from the Ministry of Education, and there are serious implications of people who do not hold office legally expending such funds. That's a serious problem, Don't think the Ministry of Education and the country don't know by now that people are not there legally and constitutionally, which is why this program by Mr. Ramdin, all prominent people from every faith called and could not believe the level Mahasabha has reduced to, and there was a clamor for the rebroadcast of his program. We were happy to oblige, and we are happy to add a couple of other things. And so to all our devotees, listeners, viewers, Shubhratri, until next Sunday, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., when Dharma Ksetra 1 hour will be on Sankhya television. Sitaram.